Hello my dear English learners. Welcome back to the Native Flow English. I'm Sarah, your teacher and friend. If you're new here, don't worry. This is a safe and friendly space where we learn English together, every single day. This particular episode is specifically crafted to help you unwind and absorb. I encourage you to listen attentively, allowing the cadence of advanced English to integrate itself into your understanding in a completely organic way. Today, I want to share a series of small, unfolding vignettes from daily life. These are not dramatic or rushed narratives, but rather observations on ordinary days, minor decisions, and simple experiences that resonate universally. These are the crucial moments where English ceases to be an object of study and becomes real, familiar, and inherently accessible. A few mornings ago, I found myself awake preceding the dawn, earlier than my usual time. The room remained wrapped in a comfortable stillness, and the city outside seemed muted, slow, and quiet. I lingered in bed for a few extra seconds, listening to the distant drone of traffic and the faint, soft hum emanating from the kitchen refrigerator. Typically, I rise around 7, but that morning, my eyes opened closer to 6. Instead of immediately checking my phone, I consciously chose to forego the digital intrusion, taking a long, deep breath and savoring the unanticipated calm. I eventually slipped out of bed, made my way to the kitchen, and set the kettle to boil. While waiting for the water to heat, I stood by the window and watched the sky slowly progress through shades of color. Early mornings possess a distinct atmosphere. They feel honest and genuinely unhurried. Pouring myself a cup of tea, I settled at the small table situated near the window, granting my thoughts permission to simply wander. As I sipped, I contemplated how often the tone of the morning establishes the rhythm for the entire day. Haste often introduces a burdensome quality to the simplest routines. Conversely, deliberate pacing makes every chore feel inherently manageable. This particular insight is shared by many, even if they seldom verbalize it. After finishing my tea, I got dressed and stepped outside. The air was cool and invigoratingly fresh. The streets had not yet assumed their daily frenzy. A few people walked past me, each engrossed in their own quiet routine. Some carried insulated coffee cups, others wore headphones, everyone engaged in a quiet choreography of individual commitments, moving toward their day. I walked to the bus stop and checked the posted schedule. The bus arrived a few minutes ahead of expectation, and I secured a window seat. I prefer sitting there because it affords me the luxury of detached observation, allowing me to watch without feeling involved. As the bus moved forward, I observed businesses unlocking doors, shops opening their shutters, and lights flicking on. It's fascinating how much life unfolds quietly, escaping conscious attention. Across the aisle, a man was absorbed in reading something on his phone with intense concentration. A woman nearby gazed out the window, clearly lost in introspection. No one spoke aloud. The pervasive quiet was not awkward, but rather a shared, comfortable space. Moments such as this are perfect for listening not just to the English language, but to the unfolding narrative of life itself. During the ride, I reflected on how travel time can be utilized in subtle, productive ways. Some commuters scroll through social media feeds. Others opt for music or podcasts. Yet, at times, mere observation suffices. Paying close attention to human expressions, subtle gestures, and ambient sounds serves as a profoundly grounding activity. After approximately half an hour, I reached my designated stop and walked the remaining distance through a notably quiet neighborhood. Trees lined the street, and the morning light filtered gently through their leaves. I passed a small bakery that had just opened its doors. An irresistible warmth of freshly baked goods spilled into the morning air, a truly inviting scent. I made a mental note to stop there later in the day. Upon arriving at my parents' house, they greeted me with familiar, gentle smiles. There is deep solace in the presence of those who know your history thoroughly. We bypassed immediate conversation, allowing a moment of shared, unhurried stillness. Later, we embarked on a short walk in a nearby park. The path was clean and shaded, and the rhythmic sound of our footsteps mixed pleasantly with the background chorus of birdsong. As we walked, my father spoke about a small, recently started project. Nothing major, simply something he enjoyed devoting time to each day. He explained it carefully, attending to every detail, and I could sense the quiet pride in his tone. Listening to him reinforced the virtue of patience, showing how consistent effort, stripped of undue pressure, invariably yields the most fulfilling results. This principle is directly applicable to many pursuits, including the endeavor of learning English. Progress rarely arrives in sudden bursts, but it advances steadily when consistency is maintained. Following the walk, we ate breakfast together, simple sustenance, comforting and familiar flavors. While eating, we discussed work plans and minor, everyday challenges. My mother listened more than she offered advice, then contributed gentle counsel. Her words advised against shouldering every burden simultaneously, emphasizing the necessity of preserving time and space for genuine rest. Her guidance stayed with me long after the meal. Later that day, I stopped by a small, independent bookstore. It was one of those tranquil havens where the pace of time seems deliberately attenuated. I drifted between the shelves, running my fingers lightly along the spines of books until one cover captured my immediate attention. I sat down and read a few pages. The atmosphere made focused reading effortlessly achievable. While engrossed, I exchanged a few words with a stranger nearby about a book we both admired. It was a brief chat, but the interaction felt utterly natural. These fleeting exchanges frequently resonate more profoundly than extended dialogues, serving as sharp reminders of the effortless nature of human connection. As I exited the bookstore, I realized just how meaningful these small, chosen moments can be. Selecting a book, sharing an impromptu thought, or simply walking without a specific destination. These quiet instances often pass unnoticed, yet they subtly shape the contours of our days. On the way home, I contemplated how language integrates into this tapestry. English is not merely a subject we study. It is something we actively live when we describe our observations, process our feelings, and reflect on our experiences. English becomes an intimate part of our inner world. That evening, I prepared dinner with my husband. We kept the meal simple, fresh ingredients, following familiar steps. While cooking, we naturally discussed the events of our day and upcoming plans. This collaborative act is always grounding. The focus shifts away from culinary perfection and toward being fully present in the moment. After dinner, we took a brief walk around the immediate neighborhood. The sky had darkened fully, and the air had grown cooler. Lights glowed softly from various windows. People passed by, some chatting quietly, others walking in solitude. Life continued, steady and calm. Before retiring for the night, I spent a few minutes writing, producing a short reflection on the day's experiences. Writing aids in organizing diffuse thoughts and bringing mental clarity. It is also a gentle way to practice English without any accompanying pressure. As I closed my notebook, the realization dawned that true learning progresses not through dramatic breakthroughs, but through cumulative small moments, revisited consistently. listening, observing, reflecting. That is the trajectory toward natural English acquisition. As you continue listening, I invite you to slow your own pace. Let the words settle deeply. Notice the texture of English when it is calm, real, and familiar. I woke the following morning to soft, diffusing light moving across the wall. The room felt quiet, calm, and entirely unhurried. For a moment, I remained perfectly still and simply listened. There were no immediate alarms, no pressing notifications. Just the distant, low sounds of a city slowly waking. I took a deliberate, slow breath and reaffirmed that there was zero necessity to rush. I went to the kitchen and prepared a simple breakfast. Nothing elaborate, just toast, fruit, and a cup of coffee. While the coffee brewed, I looked out the window once more. A few individuals were already navigating the street. Some carried bags, others walked dogs, or pushed strollers. These small scenes are easily dismissed, but they reveal much about the steady rhythm of daily life. While eating, I chose to play an English podcast quietly in the background. I didn't attempt comprehensive parsing of every phrase, choosing instead to focus solely on the overarching rhythm and intonation. This method feels inherently natural, less like academic study, and more like effortless immersion. After breakfast, I prepared to leave the house. I had a few errands to manage, none of them urgent. I consciously opted to walk instead of drive. Walking affords me crucial time to contemplate, to observe, and to register minor details that typically go unnoticed. As I walked, I paid careful attention to the ambient sounds, the scuff of footsteps on pavement, the sound of a nearby door closing, a burst of laughter carried on the wind. These sounds collectively create a rhythm that feels fundamentally comforting. I found myself silently describing what I saw in my mind. Using English, this mental exercise helps integrate English seamlessly into my natural thought process, rather than isolating it as a separate, studied mechanism. I paused at a small market to purchase fresh vegetables. The vendor greeted me with a genuine, warm smile. We exchanged a few simple words. He inquired about my day. I responded spontaneously, prioritizing authenticity over meticulous attention to grammatical rules or specific vocabulary selection. The exchange felt effortless. While selecting the vegetables, I noted the vivid colors and diverse textures. Smooth, deep red tomatoes, crisp greens, bright, waxy peppers. Describing these physical objects in English helps build vocabulary organically, because the words are directly anchored to real sensory experiences. After leaving the market, I walked toward a nearby park. The path was bordered by trees, and the air smelled clean and fresh. A few people occupied benches, either reading or observing the world drift past. Others walked slowly, luxuriating in the quiet atmosphere. I sat down briefly and watched a group of children playing. Their laughter was loud, clear, and perfectly carefree. Their energy served as a reminder of the power of staying curious and fully present. Language acquisition thrives on the very same principles. While sitting there, I considered the sheer number of opportunities we encounter daily to practice English, not in structured lessons, but in small, recurring moments. Reading directional signs, overhearing snippets of conversation, describing the immediate scenery. After some time, I stood and continued my walk. On my route home, I passed a small cafe and decided to step inside to order a drink. The cafe was quiet, accompanied by soft background music. I chose a seat by the window. While waiting, I observed a couple nearby engaging in a calm conversation. They spoke softly, clearly, and naturally. Rather than striving for complete comprehension, I intentionally focused on the subtleties of their delivery, the natural cadences, the strategic pauses, and the emotional texture conveyed by their tone. When my drink arrived, I took my time. I consciously refrained from checking my phone, choosing instead to sit, focusing entirely on enjoying the moment. This kind of stillness aids in relaxing the mind, and when the mind relaxes, listening becomes significantly easier. Later, I returned home and dedicated some time to organizing my physical space. I tidied my desk, arranged papers, and placed books back onto the shelf. While performing these tasks, I described my actions quietly in English. Simple words, simple sentences. This routine practice ensures that vocabulary truly sticks. In the afternoon, I focused on some professional work, needing to prepare a concise presentation for an upcoming meeting. Before commencing, I took a moment to strategically plan my thoughts. I focused on structuring the content to be direct and highly clear. Clarity, I find, consistently outweighs complexity in effective English communication. While working, I noticed how frequently we think faster than we speak. Slowing down helps ideas come out more naturally, and this is especially pertinent in English. Deliberate pacing allows thoughts to translate into clearer, more fluid sentences. Upon finishing the work, I felt satisfied not necessarily because everything was perfect, but because I had maintained focus and calm throughout the process. I made myself a cup of tea and settled down with a book. Reading in English has become an integral part of my daily routine. I select books that feel comfortable, neither excessively difficult nor overly simplistic. As I read, I paused occasionally to reflect on certain phrases, analyzing their construction and why they felt so intrinsically natural. This focused approach allows for the passive internalization of linguistic structures and patterns. In the early evening, my husband arrived home. We discussed our respective days while preparing dinner together. Cooking provides a casual backdrop for conversation. Eliminating pressure, we discuss simple things, minor plans, fleeting thoughts, small observations. After dinner, we washed the dishes and tidied the kitchen. Afterward, we stepped outside for a short neighborhood walk. The sky was turning darker, and the streetlights were beginning to glow. The neighborhood felt profoundly peaceful. As we walked, our conversation was about nothing particularly important, and that was precisely enough. Sometimes, conversation doesn't require a defined purpose. It only requires presence. Before going to sleep, I composed a few sentences in my notebook. I wrote about the visit to the market, the park, the cafe, and the evening walk. Writing in this manner helps forge a vital connection between listening, speaking, and thinking. As I closed my notebook, I reiterated to myself that English grows through everyday life slowly, organically, and with consistent patience. I turned off the light and allowed the day's experiences to settle quietly. The next day began without any clear, imposed plan. I awoke feeling completely restored, free from the immediate press of urgency that often dictates the start of the day. I stayed still for a moment, noticing the shift in how the morning felt when there was nothing I absolutely had to rush toward. This sense of ease made it simpler to breathe, think, and move with deliberate calm. After getting up, I opened the window to invite fresh air into the room. The exterior sounds were soft and familiar. Someone sweeping a sidewalk, a car engine starting in the distance, a bird calling from a nearby tree. These small, background sounds created a quiet backdrop for the morning. I prepared a light breakfast and ate slowly. While doing so, I considered how often we rush through meals without registering taste or texture. That morning, I paid acute attention to the warmth of the food, the simplicity of the flavors, and the feeling of being completely present. Once finished, I decided to step outside for a short walk. I purposefully left my headphones behind. I wanted to experience the world exactly as it sounded. As I walked, I noted small, compelling details. A cracked section of sidewalk, a tenacious plant growing through the fissure, a shop owner opening the door, and arranging display items outside. I found myself silently describing these scenes in English. This habit has now become second nature. It serves to connect language directly with real sensory experience. I was not translating. I was simply thinking. I walked toward a quieter street I seldom take. The houses there were older, fronted by small gardens. Some gardens were meticulously maintained. Others were wild and gloriously overgrown. Both possessed beauty in their own distinct way. An older gentleman was tending to his plants, watering them carefully. We exchanged greetings and spoke briefly. He remarked on the amount of consistent attention plants require, particularly during warmer weather. His words were plain-spoken yet full of care. Listening to him reminded me that clarity often stems directly from simplicity. Continuing my walk, I stopped at a bench and sat down. I watched the flow of people passing by. Some moved quickly, others proceeded slowly, as if they had no pressing destination. Everyone carried their own invisible narrative. While sitting there, I reflected on the role English plays in quiet moments like this. It doesn't need to be dramatic. It can exist subtly in thoughts, observations, and simple exchanges. Later that morning, I returned home and dedicated time to reading. I selected a book that felt comforting, not intellectually challenging. I read slowly, deliberately allowing the sentences to settle. When a particular phrase stood out, I paused and repeated it softly. This helps internalize the natural rhythm and structural patterns of the language. In the afternoon, I went out again to run a couple of errands at a small local shop. I asked for assistance, finding an item. The conversation was brief and polite. These short interactions are excellent practice because they are so real and immediately familiar. While walking back, I noticed a shift in the weather. The sky became slightly overcast, and the air felt perceptibly heavier. I adjusted my pace and paid attention to how the change in environment subtly affected my mood. At home, I decided to engage in some light cleaning. I put things back in their proper place and reopened the windows. While cleaning, I described my actions in English. This routine helps solidify vocabulary by connecting it directly with movement and established routine. Later, I prepared a warm drink and settled down near the window. I watched as light rain began to fall. Raindrops tracing the glass have an inherently calming effect. The steady sound made it easier to embrace the slower pace. As evening approached, my husband and I prepared dinner together. We talked about simple topics, things we had observed during the day, thoughts that had come and gone. Nothing urgent, just shared, unpressured time. After dinner, we stayed in and listened to music quietly. Sometimes, quiet moments are more valuable than busy ones. They provide crucial space for reflection. Before bed, I wrote a few lines in my notebook. I documented the walk, the conversation with the gardener, the rain, and the peaceful evening. Writing helps synthesize and make sense of small experiences. As I finished writing, I thought about how the process of learning English follows the same rhythm. It works best when it becomes a quiet, integrated part of daily existence, mirroring the slow, patient growth we observe in life itself. These moments were woven seamlessly into everyday life, calm, repetitive, and deeply rooted in real-time experience. I switched off the light, allowing the rain outside to continue its steady, gentle rhythm. The next morning carried a distinctly lighter atmosphere. The nighttime rain had ceased, washing the world clean and leaving the air cool and crisp. Opening the window, I was immediately greeted by the scent of damp earth and fresh foliage. There is a profound sense of grounding inherent in mornings like these, a paradoxical feeling of being both newly born and reassuringly familiar. I initiated the day with a deliberate, simple routine. I stretched, moving slowly and registering every sensation in my body. As I performed these movements, I narrated each action softly to myself in English. Stretch the arms. Roll the shoulders. Take a deep breath. This practice acts as a bridge, anchoring the language to tangible physical experience, transforming vocabulary from abstract concepts into something natural and embodied. After this quiet stretch, I prepared breakfast: simple oatmeal topped with fresh fruit. I watched the steam curl upward as I stirred the pot. It is remarkable how small acts like these offer true calm, provided we grant ourselves permission to notice them. I savored the meal slowly, allowing myself a few open thoughts about the upcoming day, careful not to fall into the trap of rigid overplanning. Later that morning, I chose to visit a local library, a habitual destination that fosters deep concentration and quiet contemplation. The walk was serene, the streets remained placid, and the sunlight glanced softly off car windows and building facades. Inside, the environment was immediately familiar and profoundly comforting. Endless rows of books, muffled footsteps, and hushed conversation. I secured a seat by a window and selected a book that instantly piqued my interest. My relationship with reading in English has matured. It is no longer solely an exercise in acquisition but a genuine pleasure in absorbing new ideas. I paid close attention to the author's technique for depicting emotions and mundane scenes, observing how carefully deployed simple words could conjure vivid, powerful imagery. I would periodically pause, reflecting on specific sentences and dissecting the mechanics of their effectiveness. After a substantial period of reading, I returned the volume and stepped back into the world. The exterior world seemed marginally louder following the library's silence, though it was far from jarring. I walked at a deliberate pace, allowing my thoughts time to recalibrate. En route home, I paused at a neighborhood cafe. I placed my order and waited patiently as the barista executed familiar steps with practiced confidence. Observing the steady efficiency of someone at work often yields a surprising tranquility. Routine itself is inherently comforting. Taking my drink, I settled at a window table. People entered and left. Some chatted softly, others focused on screens. I tuned into the ambient rhythm of the surrounding conversation, not analyzing the content, but simply absorbing the natural flow and cadence. That afternoon, back home, I dedicated time to tidying up some old notes and papers. While sorting, I gained an unexpected perspective on the true extent of the progress I had achieved over the months. Growth, I realized, often occurs subtly, accumulating silently, without registering in our daily awareness. As evening arrived, my husband and I opted for an extended walk. The sky was perfectly clear, and the air held a pleasant coolness. Our conversation drifted easily across ideas, shared memories, and small, emerging hopes for the future. It was a dialogue that flowed organically, devoid of any forced effort. Upon our return, we cooked a simple meal and shared it together. Later, we relaxed in the living room, enjoying the tranquil atmosphere under the dim lighting. Before retiring for the night, I engaged in my customary habit of writing, drafting just a few reflective sentences. This act serves to gently transition the day to a close, giving concrete shape to experiences that might otherwise dissolve away. Lying in bed, I contemplated how the English language integrated into this structure. It was not a separate discipline. It was inextricably woven into the fabric of life, present in thoughts, spoken conversations, daily routines, and silent observations. With this quiet acknowledgement, I allowed the day to fully conclude. The following morning dawned without fanfare. There was no jarring alarm, no abrupt sound, merely a soft, gradual awareness that the day had begun. I lingered in bed, consciously absorbing the subtle external noises, a distant door opening, footsteps echoing down the street, life progressing at its unhurried rhythm. When I eventually rose, I went straight to the kitchen and drew a glass of water. I stood for a moment, letting the gentle sunlight pour into the space. Mornings characterized by such slowness underscore the necessity of easing into the day, rather than launching oneself headlong into activity. I fixed a light breakfast and settled at the table, observing the world outside the window. A neighbor walked their dog. Another person fumbled with their car lock. These scenes are daily repetitions, yet they possess a comforting subtlety, never feeling entirely identical. After eating, I dedicated time to personal writing, free from any professional constraints. I opened my notebook and allowed my thoughts to flow uninhibitedly. This pressure-free writing enables a natural stream of consciousness and helps render English a more intimate and expressive tool. Later, I ventured out for a handful of errands. The sky was vivid, and the air was crisp. While walking, I became aware of how the changing light altered the hues of the buildings and trees. I spontaneously found myself narrating these visual details in English effortlessly. At the market, I exchanged pleasantries with the cashier, a routine greeting and a brief remark on the mild weather. These minor social transactions, though seemingly trivial, accumulate into significant confidence. They serve as a vital reminder. English need only be effective, not flawless, to function successfully. Walking back, I passed a small flower shop with its door ajar, spilling colorful arrangements onto the pavement. I paused, inhaling the rich mix of fresh blossoms and cool air. Sensory details like these, I mused, profoundly enrich language. Words gain depth when linked to sight, scent, and texture. Returning home, I spent the early afternoon reading a familiar book, chosen specifically for its easy, enjoyable flow. This type of reading helps cement natural linguistic patterns without feeling like a strenuous educational task. As the hours advanced, I tackled light household chores, folding laundry and organizing shelves. While engaged in these simple activities, I maintained a quiet self-dialogue in English, narrating clear, simple sentences for each action. This routine keeps everyday vocabulary immediately accessible. In the early evening, my husband arrived home. We exchanged brief summaries of our respective days before beginning to prepare dinner side by side. The kitchen soon filled with comforting aromas and familiar sounds. Cooking together naturally facilitated easy, low-stakes conversation, free from pressure or high expectations. After dinner, we sat outside. The air had grown cool, and the street was markedly quieter. Neighbors occasionally passed by, offering subtle nods or soft greetings. These fleeting moments of community connection are incredibly grounding. As darkness descended, I dedicated time to reflection. Penning a few lines, about the day, concentrating on its emotional resonance rather than a chronological account of events. Writing about one's feelings is an invaluable way to expand expressive range and deepen self-understanding. Just before sleep, I considered the parallel between language acquisition and life itself. Progress is never linear. It advances through steady repetition, sustained patience, and minute attention to detail. I switched off the light, allowing the silence of the night to envelop me, ready to embrace the fresh start of the following day. The morning that followed felt calm, unremarkable in the most positive sense. I woke without any clear sense of urgency, which immediately lent a lighter quality to the day. I opened the curtains, bathing the room in natural light. The sky was pale and clear, and the street below was already commencing its slow awakening. I prepared breakfast, choosing something simple and known, and ate while standing at the counter, watching the passers-by. Some moved swiftly, others drifted along, seemingly unhurried. These subtle variations in pace communicated much about how individuals approached their day. After breakfast, I spent a few minutes reviewing the notes I had drafted the previous night. Reading my own writing in English allowed me to observe how my internal dialogue was gradually becoming more organic. The sentences felt less constructed, the expressions more authentic to my personal voice. Later in the morning, I decided on a longer walk, deliberately choosing an unfamiliar route to introduce novelty. As I walked, I noted minor shifts in the neighborhood: a newly painted building, a different shop sign, a park bench repositioned nearer the path. I paused near a small local park and took a seat. The atmosphere was tranquil. A few individuals were reading or simply resting. Others strolled along the pathways. I deliberately tuned into the surrounding acoustics: leaves rustling in the breeze, footsteps crunching on gravel, distant voices melding into a soft hum. Sitting there, I reflected on the paramount importance of listening in language acquisition, not just listening to instructional material, but listening to the nuances of real life. The pauses, the shifts in tone, the simple words people choose to convey deep meaning. After a suitable interval, I resumed my walk and stopped at a nearby cafe. I ordered a drink and waited quietly, watching the staff move with efficient, familiar motions. Observing routines like these consistently reminds me how repetition forges competence, whether in a craft or in a language. I carried my drink to an outdoor table. I practiced slowing down, allowing the present moment to unfold naturally. Sometimes, the act of deceleration brings absolute clarity, extending even to one's grasp of language. In the afternoon, I returned home and spent time organizing personal items, old journals, photographs, and small sentimental objects. While sorting, I found myself recalling past moments and mentally articulating them in English. This form of introspection helps deepen vocabulary because emotional context lends words true significance. English thus becomes more than just a functional tool. It becomes a means of comprehending experience. As evening approached, I prepared dinner solo. The kitchen was quiet, and I found pleasure in the calm. I focused on each step of the preparation, describing the actions in simple, precise sentences. Cooking in this manner felt almost meditative. After the meal, I took a brief stroll. The sky was darker now, and the air had cooled. Streetlights cast elongated, soft shadows. A few bundled-up people passed by, heading home for the night. I wrote again just a few lines about the walk, the park, and the interludes of quiet. Writing at the end of the day synthesized these experiences. As I closed my notebook, I felt gratitude for the simplicity of the day. Nothing extraordinary had occurred, yet it felt entirely complete. Learning English, like living well, often manifests in these quiet, steady, and genuine moments. I turned off the light, letting the night settle, assured that the next day would bring its own array of small experiences. The next morning began with a sense of equilibrium, not anticipation, nor weariness, but simply a quiet readiness. I opened my eyes and registered the stillness of the room. The light was soft, filtered through the curtains, and the air felt cool against my skin. I began the day by making the bed, a small ritual that establishes order. While smoothing the sheets, I reflected on how small routines often dictate the overall tenor of the day. When a beginning is calm, the hours that follow typically adhere to that pattern. In the kitchen, I prepared a simple breakfast and stood by the window as I ate. I observed how the street presented differently at this hour, more motion now, more audible voices, a bus passing, someone on a phone. Life felt thoroughly awake but lacked urgency. After finishing, I sat down with coffee and opened a book, intending to read only a few pages. Morning reading helps sharpen my focus. The language feels fresh, and the words assimilate easily. I paused frequently, not due to difficulty, but because certain sentences offered profound food for thought. I analyzed the author's selection of simple expressions to convey complex ideas, a mastery I deeply admire in advanced English. Clarity, I concluded, is always more potent than complexity. Later in the morning, I went out to attend to several tasks. I chose to walk rather than drive, enjoying the physical movement and the fresh air. I took note of fleeting details, reflections in shop windows, the rhythmic sound of footsteps nearby, the aroma of coffee drifting from a distant cafe. I stopped briefly at a corner store. The exchange was swift and courteous. These routine daily transactions may seem minor, but they continually build practical confidence. They underline the fact that English functions best when it is natural and practical. On the walk home, I took a new route and found myself in a more subdued neighborhood. Fewer people, more open space. I deliberately slowed my pace, letting my thoughts drift. Thinking in English has now become entirely automatic, feeling like a natural internal conversation. Once home, I engaged in light housework, washing dishes, wiping surfaces, organizing a shelf. While working, I maintained my quiet, spoken narration of the actions. These simple sentences serve to reinforce everyday vocabulary and make spontaneous speaking feel effortless. In the afternoon, I took a necessary break, sitting near the window and watching the slow movement of clouds across the sky. Sometimes, complete mental downtime is exactly what is required. In these moments of stillness, language seems to settle gently into place. Later, I reviewed several messages and responded thoughtfully. Drafting brief, concise replies helps maintain natural communication patterns. I have learned that it is always better to articulate something simply and honestly than to strain for complex, perfect phrasing. As the day moved into evening, my husband arrived. We talked about our day while preparing dinner together, proceeding without hurry. Cooking felt relaxed and familiar, and the conversation flowed easily. After dinner, we stepped outside for a short walk. The air had cooled further, and the streets were quiet. A few glowing windows suggested people preparing to end their day. Before bed, I opened my notebook for a short reflection, not a summary, but a few quiet thoughts. Writing brings the day to a close and makes space for true rest. Lying down, I felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. Nothing extraordinary had transpired, yet the day felt complete. English, once again, had been a seamless part of life. not something detached from it. I closed my eyes, letting the pervasive calm guide me into the night. The morning arrived with remarkable gentleness, devoid of any harsh intrusion. I awoke feeling clear, as if my thoughts had been fully rested alongside my body. I remained still for a moment, absorbing the quiet, allowing awareness to surface naturally instead of forcing the day's initiation. After rising, I opened the window, inviting the fresh air inside. The sky was bright and open, and the street below held a steady tempo. I could hear distant conversations, rhythmic footsteps, and the soft pulse of traffic sounds blending into a familiar, calming background hum. I prepared breakfast slowly, focusing on each minute action, pouring water, slicing fruit, setting the table. While doing this, I contemplated how such routines establish a vital sense of stability. They demand little, yet they underpin the entire structure of the day. As I ate, I listened to an English audio story. I chose not to analyze. I simply let the voice guide my attention. The narrator's tone was relaxed, the pacing organic. This passive listening helps English feel intuitive rather than academic. Later in the morning, I decided to spend time outdoors. I put on comfortable shoes and embarked on a walk. The weather was mild, and the air was pleasant. As I walked, I noticed the rhythm of my steps and how my thoughts mirrored that tempo. I passed familiar landmarks and encountered a few new details. A small shop I hadn't seen, a bench recently placed under a tree. These minor discoveries added a quiet layer of interest to the excursion. At one point, I stopped to observe a man repairing a bicycle. He worked meticulously, concentrating on every detail. I watched for a moment, captivated by his focused movements. Observing someone fully engaged in a task can be strangely calming. It serves as a reminder that attention brings clarity. As I continued, I realized I was describing what I saw in English. It was not deliberate, it simply happened. This is one of the clearest indicators that English has integrated into my daily thinking. Around midday, I returned home and prepared a light lunch. I ate slowly and followed it with a brief rest. Rest, I realized, doesn't always necessitate sleep. Sometimes, it merely requires a genuine pause. In the afternoon, I sat down to read. I chose a book that felt familiar. A quiet thoughtfulness settled over the day, never becoming burdensome. Reading during the quiet hours deepens my understanding because my mind is less prone to external distractions. Later, I engaged in a few simple household tasks. They were nothing urgent, just small necessities that required my gentle attention. As I worked, I spoke softly to myself in English, using straightforward phrases to describe clear actions. This kind of practice is truly effortless because it integrates seamlessly into the natural flow of my routine. As the evening drew near, the quality of light in the room shifted. Shadows stretched out longer, and the air carried a subtle coolness. I prepared a warm beverage and settled by the window, observing the sky soften into quieter shades of color. When my husband arrived home, we exchanged a few words before making dinner, sharing simple observations from our respective days. These conversations require no fixed structure. They simply unfold organically. After dinner, we remained in, choosing to relax. The day had been satisfying in a quiet sense, not defined by busyness, but by completion. Before turning in, I paused for one final reflection. I considered how English has gradually transformed into a language I live with, rather than a challenge I struggle against. Through consistent listening, observing, and reflecting, it has naturally found its place within the texture of everyday life. I extinguished the light, allowing the day's calmness to settle. Ready for a fresh start tomorrow, the following morning dawned with a soft sense of anticipation and curiosity. I had no strict agenda, but I felt receptive to whatever the day might offer. When I awoke, the light filtering into the room was gentle, and the air felt invigoratingly cool and fresh. I took a deliberate moment to stretch, noticing the well-rested state of my body after a solid night's sleep. I then went to the kitchen and prepared breakfast, consciously making something slightly different to introduce a small shift in the routine. While eating, I stood near the window, observing the individuals moving along the street below. Some moved quickly, clearly set on their destinations, while others slowed their pace, stopping to take in their surroundings or exchange greetings with acquaintances. After breakfast, I decided to dedicate the start of the day to writing. I opened my notebook and engaged in free writing for several minutes. I ignored concerns about structure or grammatical correctness, simply allowing whatever thoughts surfaced to flow onto the page. This habit encourages thoughts to form naturally in English and makes personal expression feel more authentic. Later that morning, I stepped outside for a walk. The weather was agreeable, and the sky was perfectly clear. As I moved, I noticed the neighborhood felt more vibrant than earlier in the week. Shops were bustling, people were conversing, and there was a palpable sense of life being fully awake. I passed a small street market where vendors were carefully arranging their merchandise. I paused to browse, and exchanged a few brief, friendly words with one of them. Moments like these serve as a vital reminder. English does not require perfection to be effective. It merely needs to be clear and sincerely conveyed. Continuing my walk, I discovered a secluded path shaded by trees. I deliberately reduced my speed and listened to the subtle rustling of leaves in the breeze. I described the scene silently in English, concentrating on simple words that felt both accurate and effortless. Around midday, I returned home and prepared lunch. While cooking, I narrated each step aloud, a habit I often employ. This technique keeps active vocabulary current and makes speaking feel more automatic. After lunch, I scheduled time for rest. I sat down with a book and read for a while, allowing the language to sink in without any sense of obligation. Reading during the day feels distinctly different from reading at night. The mind feels sharper, more open to absorption. In the afternoon, I organized a few personal belongings, old papers, notebooks, and various small items accumulated over time. As I sorted through them, memories naturally emerged, and I found myself articulating those recollections in English, forging a deeper connection between language and emotion. As the day progressed toward evening, I stepped out once more. The air had cooled further, and the light had grown softer. I walked slowly, savoring the quiet rhythm of the neighborhood. A few people passed by, offering courteous greetings. Upon returning home, I prepared dinner. The process felt both familiar and deeply soothing. Cooking provides a physical task for the hands, which allows the mind to relax and wander. Following the meal, I sat in silence for a time. No music, no screens, only stillness. These moments of quietude are invaluable. They permit scattered thoughts to settle and create space for genuine reflection. Before heading to bed, I penned a few sentences in my notebook. My goal wasn't literary merit but simple honesty. Writing in this manner helps to bring a gentle close to the day. As I lay down, I reflected on how learning English fundamentally mirrors this daily process. It flourishes through everyday moments, small, consistent habits, and steady attention. There is no need for haste, only consistency. I switched off the light, letting the profound calm of the day envelop me, prepared to begin anew tomorrow. The next day began with a grounded sense of familiarity. I woke up with a clear mind, free from any strong emotional pull in a specific direction. The room was still, and the quality of the light suggested a perfectly ordinary day lay ahead. Sometimes, these are the best kind of days. I rose from bed and went directly to the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of water and stood still for a minute, giving myself time to fully awaken. Small, simple habits like this help establish a feeling of being grounded before the demands of the day begin. I made breakfast and sat down at the table. While eating, I considered how often we dismiss routine as something mundane, when in truth, it provides essential structure and comfort. Knowing what follows next can be wonderfully reassuring. After breakfast, I dedicated time to reviewing messages and emails. I drafted replies slowly and deliberately, choosing words that were clear and natural. Writing in English has become significantly easier over time, particularly as I have shifted my focus toward clarity rather than complexity. Later in the morning, I decided to visit a local park. The walk there was peaceful. The streets were not crowded, and the air felt crisp. As I walked, I intentionally observed small details: a lone bird perched on a fence, a fallen leaf skittering across the sidewalk. These quiet moments often go unappreciated, yet they add profound depth to the overall experience of the day. At the park, I found an empty bench and settled down. I watched the flow of people. Some were walking their dogs, others sat alone, absorbed in thought. Observing people without applying judgment or interrupting their presence helps cultivate patience and heightened awareness. While sitting there, I contemplated what advanced listening truly entails. It is not about grasping every single word, but rather about capturing the overarching meaning, the underlying tone, and the speaker's intention. This principle holds true for all meaningful everyday conversations. After some time, I stood up and resumed my walk. On my route back home, I stopped at a small neighborhood shop to purchase a necessary item. The interaction was brief, polite, and completely seamless. These minor, everyday exchanges naturally reinforce confidence in a practical way. Back at home, I spent the afternoon working quietly. I focused on managing one task at a time, consciously avoiding unnecessary interruptions. Clear thinking inherently leads to clear expression, especially when working in a secondary language. In the late afternoon, I took a short break and brewed a warm drink. I paused by the window and watched the light transform. Clouds drifted lazily, and shadows stretched across the nearby buildings. The world outside felt predictable and calm. As the evening approached, my husband came home. We talked about the events of the day and exchanged small, simple observations, nothing dramatic, just easy conversation. This type of communication helps the language feel real and intimately connected to life. We prepared dinner together, moving around the kitchen comfortably side by side. Cooking collaboratively creates a relaxing atmosphere for conversation, removing any pressure to sound impressive. After dinner, we took a gentle stroll. The air had cooled further, and the streets were notably quieter. A few neighbors passed by, wrapping up their days just as we were. Before getting ready for bed, I wrote again, creating a brief reflection on the park visit, the quiet work session, and the evening walk. Writing transforms experiences into language and keeps English fluency active. As I lay down, I was filled with a sense of equilibrium. The day hadn't been exciting, but it had felt complete in its own fashion. Learning English feels similar. It may lack constant drama, but the quiet progress is consistently accruing. I closed my eyes, letting the day's balance carry me into rest. The following morning arrived with a soft sense of purpose, not a rigid plan, but a quiet awareness that I wanted the day to progress gently. I opened my eyes and noticed how deeply rested my body felt. The room was still, and the air was cool and peaceful. I rose and made my way to the kitchen. I prepared breakfast slowly, without engaging in any multitasking. I sliced fruit, poured water, and stood by the counter while eating. Outside, the street was already active, though not yet noisy. People moved with intention, starting their established routines. While eating, I reflected on how often we rush through our mornings without truly observing them. Slowing down allows thoughts to settle and clears the space for mental clarity. This habit has helped me feel more present, not only in life, but crucially, in language use. After breakfast, I sat down with my notebook and composed a short reflection. I wrote about the morning's feeling and what I wished to concentrate on that day. Writing immediately upon waking helps to organize thoughts and makes English feel like a natural extension of internal thinking. Later, I headed out for a walk. I chose a familiar route, one I have traveled countless times before. Even familiar paths shift slightly. Each day the light is different, the air feels different, and people appear and vanish. I took note of these subtle details and described them silently in English. I passed a small bakery and paused for a moment to watch the baker carefully arranging loaves of bread in the window. His movements were precise and methodical. Observing someone working with such focused attention is calming. It reminds me that deliberate attention improves every endeavor we undertake, including effective communication. Continuing my walk, I entered a quieter street lined with trees. Leaves rustled softly in the breeze, and the sound of distant traffic receded. I slowed my pace and allowed my thoughts to flow uninhibitedly. Thinking in English felt utterly effortless in that moment. Around midday, I returned home and prepared lunch. While cooking, I narrated each step aloud, simple verbs, clear actions. This simple habit keeps practical vocabulary engaged and connected to physical movement. After lunch, I dedicated time to resting. I sat near the window and simply embraced stillness. No reading, no listening, just quiet downtime. Moments like this allow the mind to fully reset. In the afternoon, I spent time reading. I selected a book that was thoughtful yet easy to digest. I deliberately paused occasionally to notice how complex ideas were conveyed clearly, without reliance on overly complicated structures. Later, I organized a few things around the house: old notes, books, and various small objects. As I sorted through them, specific memories came to the surface. I described them silently in English, realizing how emotion naturally adds depth to language. As evening approached, I stepped outside again. The air was noticeably cooler, and the lights had softened. I walked slowly, observing how the neighborhood adjusted as people returned home. Doors opened, lights switched on, and fragments of conversations drifted through open windows. When I returned home, I prepared dinner. Cooking alone can be just as restorative as cooking together. I focused solely on the process and let the day's experiences settle. After eating, I wrote a few sentences about the day, not a structured summary, but merely small observations. This writing helps to gently conclude the day. As I prepared for bed, I reflected on how English has become fundamentally integrated into my daily rhythm. Through consistent listening, observing, speaking, and writing, It has found its place naturally. I turned off the light, allowing the quiet of the night to take hold, prepared to continue the process tomorrow. The next day unfolded slowly, without anything immediately demanding my attention. I woke up feeling rested and calm, with the comforting sense that there was ample time for everything. I lingered in bed briefly, listening to the subtle sounds outside, a distant car passing, the creak of someone opening a window. The world was awake, but not yet rushing. When I finally rose, I went straight to the kitchen and made myself a warm drink. I stood near the window while sipping it, watching the street below. People moved in predictable patterns, some walked quickly, others took their time. These everyday scenes consistently remind me how diverse each person's individual rhythm can be. I decided to begin the morning with gentle movement. I stretched, rotated my shoulders, and took a few deep, intentional breaths. While doing this, I described the movements softly in English. This habit ensures that language remains physically connected to the body, making vocabulary feel natural and highly practical. After stretching, I prepared breakfast and ate slowly. I paid attention to how much more flavor food has when one is not distracted. Paying close attention to simple things helps the mind stay focused, which is crucial for clear listening and speaking. Later in the morning, I ventured out for a walk. The air felt fresh, and the light was soft. As I walked, I noted small alterations in the neighborhood, a new sign displayed on a shop, a bouquet of fresh flowers placed outside a doorway. These small details often escape notice, but they lend specific character to daily life. I passed a small workshop where someone was mending furniture. The rhythmic sound of tools echoed softly. I stopped for a moment to watch. The person worked meticulously, taking adequate time with each step. Observing such focused craftsmanship reminds me that patience inherently improves results, whether in a physical craft or in effective communication. Continuing my walk, I found a secluded spot and sat down. I observed the people passing by, listening to fragments of their conversations. I made no attempt to decode every word. Instead, I concentrated on their tone, pace, and underlying emotion. Advanced listening often functions best in this non-literal, holistic way. Around midday, I returned home and prepared a simple lunch. While cooking, I narrated the steps aloud in English. Chop, stir, taste. This practice keeps everyday action-oriented language effortlessly active. After eating, I took time to rest. I sat near the window and watched the clouds migrate across the sky. Doing nothing for a brief period helps reset the mind and allows learning to feel less demanding. In the afternoon, I dedicated time to reading. I chose a book that felt thoughtful but was easy to track. I focused on how ideas transitioned smoothly from one sentence to the next, noting that clear structure significantly enhances comprehension. Later, I engaged in some light organizing around the house, sorting papers and tidying up. While working, I quietly described what I was doing. This habit reinforces practical vocabulary and gradually builds overall fluency. As evening arrived, the light in the room shifted, shadows lengthened, and the air cooled. I made myself a warm beverage and sat quietly, reflecting on the day. Nothing extraordinary had occurred, yet the day felt undeniably full. When my husband came home, we talked about our respective days while preparing dinner. The conversation was relaxed and completely spontaneous. Sharing small details helps language feel personal and grounded in reality. After dinner, we took a short walk. The neighborhood was calm, and the streets had emptied out. A few people passed by, concluding their day. Before retiring, I wrote a short reflection. Writing consistently helps connect lived experience with language and brings greater clarity to my thoughts. As I lay down, I felt genuinely thankful for the day's simplicity. Learning English, much like living mindfully, grows through these quiet, steady, and honest moments. I closed my eyes, letting the established calm carry me into the night. The morning that followed arrived with a quiet sense of seamless continuity. It felt familiar, as if the rhythm of the preceding days had settled into something steady and reliably comfortable. I awoke naturally, without any need to rush, and remained still for a moment, listening to the soft sounds of the neighborhood beginning another day. I got out of bed and drew open the curtains. The sky was bright, and the air appeared clear. I went to the kitchen and prepared a simple breakfast. While waiting for the kettle to reach a boil, I leaned against the counter and allowed my thoughts to drift. I wasn't trying to plan the day in specific detail. I simply permitted ideas to surface and recede. While eating, I listened to the sounds outside, someone talking on the phone, a car door closing, footsteps passing by. These everyday sounds form a kind of constant, low-level background music to life. I noticed how effortlessly my mind grasped the English phrases that drifted through my thoughts. No conscious effort was needed. It felt entirely natural. After breakfast, I decided to spend some time organizing my internal thoughts. I sat down with my notebook and wrote freely. I sought out something thoughtful to read, nothing too demanding, knowing that quiet hours allow for deeper understanding, as the mind is less fragmented. Later, I occupied myself with a few simple household tasks, minor things that required attention but no urgency. As I worked, I kept a soft stream of English going, speaking simple phrases aloud, connecting actions to clear vocabulary. This effortless practice allowed the language to weave naturally into my routine. When evening drew near, the light shifted, casting longer shadows and cooling the air. I prepared a warm drink and watched the sky outside the window fade into muted, softer tones. When my husband arrived, we exchanged brief stories before settling in to prepare dinner. Our conversations are uncomplicated and flow naturally, without the need for forced structure. The day, while not busy, felt quietly complete. Before resting, I paused for one last reflection. English, I realized, has slowly moved from a subject of struggle to a steady presence I simply live with. Through consistent observation, listening, and quiet contemplation, it has secured its place in the fabric of my daily life. I turned off the light, allowing the day's calm to settle, ready for the cycle to begin anew tomorrow. The subsequent morning arrived with an easy sense of curiosity. Without fixed plans, I embraced whatever the day might offer. I woke to gentle light and cool, fresh air. After a moment of stretching to acknowledge a good night's rest, I prepared a slightly different breakfast. Seeking a minor change in routine, I ate by the window, observing the street. Some people hurried, destination-focused. Others paused, greeting acquaintances or simply looking around. I began the day not with chores, but with writing. Opening my notebook, I engaged in free-flowing composition, ignoring grammar or structure. This habit facilitates natural thought progression in English, making my expression feel genuine and deeply personal. I stepped out later for a walk under a clear and pleasant sky. The neighborhood felt vibrant now. Passing a small street market, I stopped briefly to admire the vendors arranging their goods and exchanged a few friendly words with one. These interactions are powerful reminders that effective English only requires sincerity and clarity, not perfection. Continuing my way, I found a shaded, quiet path and slowed my pace, listening to the movement of leaves in the breeze. I described the scene silently, selecting simple, precise words to capture the moment. Returning around midday, I prepared lunch, continuing my habit of narrating each step aloud. This continuous vocalization ensures my everyday vocabulary remains sharp and keeps the act of speaking reflexive. Post-lunch, I took time for genuine rest, reading a book without pressure, allowing the words to settle into a mind that felt lighter than at night. The afternoon was spent organizing personal items, old papers, notebooks, and accumulated trinkets. As I sorted through these items, memories arose, and I found myself describing them internally in English, linking emotion directly to the language. As evening approached, I ventured out again, enjoying the neighborhood's quiet rhythm and the cooling, softer light. Returning home, the process of preparing dinner was familiar and calming, a task that engages the hands and frees the mind. Afterward, I sought out stillness. No music, no screens. These silent moments are invaluable for allowing thoughts to settle and making space for genuine reflection. I closed the day by writing a few honest sentences in my notebook. This gentle ritual brings the day to a close. Lying down, I reflected on how learning English mirrors this entire process. It thrives on small, consistent habits and steady attention. Not urgency. I welcomed the rest, knowing the cycle would resume tomorrow. The following morning felt steady and comfortably familiar. I woke with a clear, unhurried mind, recognizing that the ordinary days are often the most fulfilling. I started with simple, grounding habits: a glass of water, a moment standing still before preparing breakfast. While eating, I considered how often we undervalue routine. In reality, it provides structure and reassurance, offering comfort in knowing what comes next. After breakfast, I dedicated time to reviewing messages and emails. I responded carefully, choosing language that was clear and natural. Over time, writing in English has become less effortful, particularly when I prioritize clarity over unnecessary complexity. Later that morning, I walked to a nearby park. The journey was calm, the streets uncrowded, and the air clean. I practiced mindful observation, noticing tiny details: a bird on a fence, a leaf drifting on the sidewalk. These quiet moments, often overlooked, enrich the texture of the day. Sitting on a bench in the park, I watched the flow of people, dog walkers, solitary figures lost in thought. Observing without judgment cultivates patience and awareness. Here, I reflected on advanced listening. It isn't about grasping every word, but catching the speaker's intention, tone, and underlying meaning. A quick stop at a small shop on the way back for a needed item provided a brief, polite, and effortless conversation, naturally reinforcing my confidence. The afternoon was dedicated to quiet work, focusing on one task at a time, deliberately minimizing distraction. Clear thinking naturally translates into clearer expression, especially when navigating another language. I took a late afternoon break, holding a warm drink by the window as the light shifted, creating slow, moving shadows across the buildings, a calm, predictable world. When my husband came home, we shared small observations about our day. These simple, undramatic exchanges ground the language, connecting it directly to lived experience. We prepared dinner collaboratively, moving easily around the kitchen, which allowed for relaxed conversation without pressure to impress. Following dinner, we enjoyed a gentle walk as the air cooled and the streets quieted, watching others complete their day just as we were. Before bed, I wrote a brief reflection on the day: the quiet work, the park, the evening stroll, using writing to transform experience into active language. Lying down, I felt balanced. The day hadn't been exciting, but it had been entirely full in its own quiet way. Learning English, I realized, follows this same pattern. Progress is often silent, yet steady. I closed my eyes, letting the sense of fulfillment settle in, ready for the next day's unfolding. The subsequent morning arrived with a soft sense of intention. It wasn't a rigid plan, but a quiet awareness of wanting the day to progress gently. I woke feeling rested, embraced the stillness, and slowly prepared breakfast. Focusing entirely on the process, I stood by the counter while eating, slicing fruit and pouring water, without the distraction of multitasking. Outside, the street was active, but not noisy, people moving purposefully into their routines. I reflected on how often we rush the mornings. Slowing down allows thoughts to coalesce, creating space for mental clarity. This mindful habit has made me feel more present in both life and language. After breakfast, I immediately sat down for a short reflection in my notebook, writing about the morning's mood and the day's gentle focus. Writing early helps organize my thoughts and makes English feel like a natural extension of my inner dialogue. Later, I set out on a familiar route. Even well-known paths reveal subtle daily changes, a different quality of light, a shift in the air, people appearing and vanishing. I practiced describing these fine details silently in English. Passing a small bakery, I paused to watch the baker carefully arranging bread in the window. The focused, repetitive movements were profoundly calming. It reaffirmed that focused attention improves all actions, including communication. Continuing along a quieter, tree-lined street, the sound of traffic dissolved. I slowed my pace, allowing my thoughts to flow effortlessly in English. Around midday, I returned home to prepare lunch. Narrating each simple step aloud, chopping, stirring, seasoning. This habit keeps essential vocabulary connected to real physical movement, enhancing automaticity. Following lunch, I allowed myself a period of non-activity. Sitting quietly by the window, no reading, no screens, just stillness, allowing the mind a crucial opportunity to reset. In the afternoon, I turned to reading, choosing a book with simple yet profound language that explored everyday reflections. I noted how ideas were conveyed with striking clarity, free from overly complex structures. I organized some household items, old notes, books, small objects, and as I sorted, memories surfaced, which I silently described in English, noting how emotion adds necessary depth to linguistic expression. As dusk neared, I stepped outside again. The air had cooled, and the light softened as people returned home. Doors opening, lights flicking on, fragments of conversation drifting from windows. Returning home, I prepared dinner alone. The focused process felt grounding. After eating, I recorded small, honest observations in my notebook, a gentle way to conclude the day. Preparing for rest, I reflected on how English has merged into my natural daily rhythm. Through continuous cycles of listening, observing, speaking, and writing, it has found its comfortable, inherent place. I dimmed the lights, embracing the night's quiet, ready for continuity tomorrow. The subsequent day unfolded slowly, devoid of any immediate demands. I woke feeling rested and calm, embraced by the sense that time was ample. I lingered briefly, listening to the soft sounds of the waking neighborhood, a distant car, a window opening, a world awake, but not rushing. I made a warm drink, and watched the familiar patterns on the street from the window, noting the varied pace of passers-by, a subtle reminder of individual rhythms. I chose to start the day with gentle movement, stretching my shoulders, taking deep breaths. As I moved, I quietly narrated the actions in English. This simple practice keeps language connected to the physical body, reinforcing practical vocabulary effortlessly. I prepared and ate breakfast slowly, noting how attention enhances the taste of food. Focusing on simple things sharpens the mind, a skill essential for clear listening and speaking. I walked outside later, enjoying the fresh air and soft light, observing small shifts in the neighborhood, a new shop sign, fresh flowers, details that give daily life its character. I paused near a small workshop where someone was carefully repairing furniture. The focus and patience displayed mirrored the careful work required in communication. Continuing my walk, I found a quiet place to sit and observe, listening to fragments of conversation. I focused not on translating every word, but on grasping the emotion, pace, and tone, the most effective way to practice advanced listening. I returned home around midday and prepared a simple lunch, once again narrating the steps aloud. Chop, stir, taste. This maintains an active, practical vocabulary without conscious effort. Post-lunch, I rested by the window, watching the movement of clouds. Allowing the mind a brief period of inactivity helps reset the system, making learning feel lighter. The afternoon was dedicated to thoughtful reading, focusing on texts that flowed naturally, highlighting how clear structure facilitates understanding. Later, I engaged in light organizing, sorting papers and tidying, describing these actions quietly to reinforce practical vocabulary and build steady fluency. As evening arrived, the light softened, shadows lengthened, and I paused for reflection. Though nothing dramatic occurred, the day felt profoundly full. My husband arrived, and we shared relaxed, unplanned conversation while cooking, allowing the exchange to feel personal and connected to our lives. After dinner, a short walk offered a peaceful transition to the end of the day. Before bed, I wrote a short reflection, using the process to solidify the connection between experience and language, which brings clarity to my thoughts. Lying down, I felt deep gratitude for the simplicity of the day. Learning English, much like living well, grows through these quiet, steady, honest moments. I closed my eyes, letting the pervasive calm carry me into sleep. The morning that followed arrived with a quiet sense of continuity, a familiar feeling that the rhythm of the days had truly settled into something steady and immensely comfortable. I woke naturally, unhurried, and remained still for a moment, listening to the soft sounds of the neighborhood beginning its routine. I opened the curtains to a clear, light sky, and prepared a simple breakfast. While waiting for the kettle, I leaned against the counter, letting my thoughts drift without detailed planning. While eating, I absorbed the ambient sounds, a phone conversation, a car door, passing footsteps, the daily background score. I noted the ease with which English phrases now flowed through my mind. There was no conscious effort, it simply felt inherent. After breakfast, I decided to spend some time organizing my thoughts. I sat down with my notebook and began to write freely. I wrote how the week had unfolded, recording small, passing observations, and reflecting on how certain recurring routines had begun to feel deeply comforting, rather than merely tedious or repetitive. This introspective writing practice helps transform abstract language into a personal extension of self. Later that morning, I stepped outside to run a few errands. The walk itself was pleasant. The weather felt perfectly balanced, neither too warm nor too cool. As I moved, I consciously observed the interactions between people. Brief, warm greetings, polite but sincere smiles, and minor exchanges that consumed little time, yet added considerable warmth to the atmosphere of the day. I stopped at a local shop and posed a simple, direct question. The response was clear and genuinely friendly. Conversations like these consistently affirm that truly effective English is often simple and direct. There is no hidden agenda to impress. The sole and vital goal is mutual understanding. Choosing a slightly longer route home, I passed through a quiet residential area. The houses stood placidly, some revealing glimpses of life through open curtains, others remaining private behind closed drapes. I indulged my imagination, envisioning the countless lives unfolding quietly inside. This mental exercise naturally fosters descriptive language and enhances narrative building skills. Upon returning home, I prepared lunch and ate quietly. I deliberately chose not to multitask, focusing intently on the textures, the taste of the food, and the simple feeling of being fully present. These deliberate moments of focus sharpen both listening skills and comprehension, training the mind to sustain attention on a single task. In the afternoon, I dedicated time to reviewing content I had read earlier in the week. I noted how significantly easier it was to grasp the material now. While repetition may not always feel immediately productive, it invariably deepens and solidifies understanding over time. Later, I engaged in some light cleaning. I opened the windows to invite fresh air in and moved slowly while I worked. I consciously described my actions in English, using straightforward verbs and clear, unadorned sentences. This type of practice effortlessly keeps core vocabulary active. As the day drew toward evening, the quality of the light shifted again. I prepared a warm drink and settled near the window, watching the stream of people returning home, some walking alone, others together. The usual hurried pace of the street began to slow. When my husband arrived, we spoke briefly before commencing dinner preparation. Our conversation wasn't pre-planned, it simply unfolded naturally. These unhurried, relaxed exchanges are precisely where language reveals its most authentic self. After dinner, we remained indoors, enjoying the profound quiet. There was no imperative to fill the space with unnecessary sound. Silence, when genuinely shared, can be deeply comfortable. Before retiring for the night, I quickly wrote a few lines reflecting on the day. Writing serves to capture moments that might otherwise quickly dissipate, and crucially, it reinforces the tangible connection between lived experience and language acquisition. As I switched off the light, a quiet sense of appreciation settled over me for the consistent rhythm of everyday life. My journey with learning English has mirrored this exact pattern, slow, steady, and securely grounded in real, ordinary moments. I closed my eyes, prepared to continue the unfolding journey tomorrow. The following morning arrived, bringing with it a gentle, palpable clarity. I woke up feeling centered and stable, as if the consistent rhythm of the previous days had solidified into a steady, reliable foundation. There was absolutely no feeling of urgency or pressure to rush the start of the day. I lingered in bed for a brief moment, inhaling slowly and allowing the new day to gently approach me. When I finally rose, I pulled the window wide open. Cool air instantly flooded the room, carrying with it the muted sounds of the outside world. The quick whir of a passing bicycle, the soft landing of a bird on the railing nearby. These small, fleeting details grounded me before the active part of the day even began. I prepared breakfast and made the conscious choice to sit at the table rather than eat while standing. This seemingly minor decision imbued the morning with a meaningful sense of intention. As I ate, I reflected deeply on the profound way small habits shape our entire mindset. When we consciously choose calm, intentional actions, our thoughts inevitably follow suit. After breakfast, I decided to dedicate time to reading. I picked up a book I was already familiar with and deliberately read only a few pages, taking them in slowly. I made sure not to skim or rush the text, paying keen attention to the flow of sentences and the subtle connection between ideas. I realized that truly advanced English often presents as simple, because its primary focus is absolute clarity rather than unnecessary stylistic decoration. Later in the morning, I ventured out for another walk. The weather remained agreeable, and the streets seemed invitingly open. As I walked, I noted how familiar surroundings appeared subtly different each day, a reminder that light, movement, and our internal mood constantly alter our perception. I passed a small cafe and paused briefly to look inside. People sat absorbed, some working quietly, others conversing softly. I ordered a drink and found a table near the window. While waiting, I simply listened to the natural rhythm of the conversations around me, not struggling to decode every word, but merely absorbing the genuine sound of English as it is truly spoken. Finishing my drink, I took an easy, unhurried pace walking home. There was no internal pressure to hurry. Slowing the physical pace allows thoughts to settle and, surprisingly, makes the flow of language feel much smoother. Back at home, I dedicated some time to organizing my workspace. I rearranged a few items, filed old notes, and deliberately created space for new thoughts. As I worked, I described my actions quietly in English. These small, practical habits ensure the language remains active and integrated. In the afternoon, I turned to a task requiring deep focus. I meticulously broke it down into smaller steps, moving through them deliberately. I observed that working with such calm attention greatly enhanced the clarity of my thoughts, particularly when formulating ideas or writing in English. I later took a necessary break, sitting by the window to watch the light slowly shift across the room. The clouds drifted, and shadows subtly changed shape. Quiet moments, essential for the mind to relax and reset. As evening approached, my husband returned. We talked briefly about our respective days before preparing dinner together. The conversation flowed effortlessly and naturally. Cooking side by side reliably creates an environment conducive to relaxed, uncomplicated communication. After dinner, we stepped out for a short walk. The air had cooled slightly, and the street felt significantly quieter. We observed people passing, some speaking softly, others walking alone as the day began its final settling. Before going to bed, I opened my notebook for a short, distilled reflection. I didn't try to capture every detail, focusing only on what truly felt meaningful. Journaling fundamentally aids in transforming raw experience into coherent language, thereby deepening overall understanding. As I lay down, my thoughts drifted to how seamlessly English has become woven into the fabric of these daily moments. It no longer feels like something distinct from my life. Instead, it moves quietly through my routines, my thoughts, and my conversations, operating efficiently without demanding conscious attention. One evening, having finished dinner, I sat alone in the living room for a few minutes. The lights were dimmed, and the space felt calm and intimately familiar. I listened to the quiet, internal hum of the house and reflected on the extent of change that had occurred without any forced, dramatic effort. There had been no single, sudden breakthrough moment or flash of instant realization. Only consistent, steady progress built meticulously from ordinary days. I pondered how frequently learning functions this way. We often anticipate transformation to be noisy or exciting, yet true, lasting change almost invariably occurs quietly. It emerges when we consistently repeat small actions without pressure, when we listen just a little more carefully, when we speak without the paralyzing fear of striving for perfection, and when we allow our skills to grow organically. The next morning, I woke up feeling deeply refreshed and clear-headed. I intentionally followed the same gentle routine, opening the window, letting the fresh air circulate, and quietly preparing breakfast. Outside, the world continued at its own measured pace. People passed by. Life simply moved forward. Later that day, I engaged in a conversation with someone I had never encountered before. It was entirely unplanned and brief, yet it felt strikingly easy. The words surfaced without hesitation. I wasn't searching desperately for the right expression or agonizing over potential mistakes. I simply listened, responded authentically, and remained fully present in the exchange. That particular moment lingered with me. It provided a powerful reminder that fluency is ultimately not about sounding impressive or perfect. It is fundamentally about feeling comfortable. It's about the seamless act of understanding and being understood, a focus on connection, not perfection. As the day continued to unfold, I moved through the established, familiar routines: walking, cooking, reading, writing. Each activity presented yet another opportunity to stay organically connected to the language. English was truly inseparable from life now. It was woven deeply into its texture. In the evening, I wrote in my notebook again, not for the sake of studying or practicing grammar, but solely for reflection. I described the minor, significant moments that made the day feel complete. Writing helped me slow down and fully appreciate how far I had progressed. I grasped a critical realization. When we cease treating English as an isolated task and begin treating it as an essential component of our daily experience, everything transforms. Listening becomes effortless. Speaking gains calm assurance, and confidence flourishes quietly. There is no final finish line with language. There is no ultimate level where learning abruptly stops. This realization, I believe, is inherently positive, as it guarantees continuous room to grow, to notice, and to connect. As I prepared for bed that night, my gratitude was focused not on dramatic progress, but on consistency, patience, and the simple, persistent habit of showing up every single day. If you are reading this now, I urge you to remember this truth. You do not need to rush the process. You do not need to forcibly achieve fluency overnight. And you absolutely do not need to sound perfect. All that is required is genuine attention, persistent curiosity, and the sincere willingness to allow English to settle into your real, everyday life. Listen to the stories around you. Observe the world meticulously. Describe what you witness. Speak when you feel ready. Write when the impulse feels natural. Day by day, and moment by precious moment, English will quietly and naturally settle into you, and for good. Thank you for spending this time with me.